So contrary to your programs, I am not John Solomon. John ran out of voice. He got sick, and he used it all on the panel a little bit earlier. And he promises me it wasn't because he was screaming at the refs last weekend. He was acting like the good sports parent that we've been talking about today. But this is a really exciting panel. This is Hoop Dreams at 25. Is youth basketball any wiser now? And really asking the question of how well basketball is serving all kids. And this is an important question because basketball is played by more kids in this country, 4.2 million, just at the 12 and under level than any other sport. So if we're going to get youth sports right in this country, we've got to get youth basketball right. It's got to be a good player. It's got to align with best practices. It has to work with other sports to be able to create the kind of childhood that we want every kid in this country to have. Hoop Dreams, as Dan expressed, is really one of the most influential movies in a couple different ways. Number one, it pretty much launched the sports documentary genre. So for 30 for 30, everything you've seen on HBO and otherwise. This guy to my left, who I'll introduce in a moment, helped get off the ground. The second thing is it really, the theme. It underscored the fact that there is something wrong with our sports system and how well it is serving kids. It launched a lot of thought in this space and in some ways actually provided the foundation for Project Play and the questions that we put on the table and try to have people think about and drive toward solutions. So, let me just introduce our, really incredible set of speakers here. To my left is Peter Gilbert. Peter was one of the filmmakers of Hoop Dreams and is now a professor at Wake University's documentary film program. He's won national and international honors for his groundbreaking work as a producer, director, and cinematographer. He's filmed a lot of AAU basketball through the years and, like the man to his left, has witnessed the inner workings of youth basketball culture. And the man to his left really needs no introduction. This, of course, is Chris Webber, who you're a little bit familiar with here in the state of Michigan. Chris is, come on, yeah.
Congrats, man.
Former NBA All-Star, University of Michigan star, remember the famed Fab Five? They brought in the really short shorts. Thank you for your innovation there, Chris. He actually appeared in the film Hoop Dreams because he was the nation's most sought-after recruit at that time. Today, he is a Turner Sports NBA analyst and broadcasts the NCAA tournament. So I want to get started here. Peter, can you just give us a quick synopsis for those folks in the room who may not have seen Hoop Dreams or haven't seen it in 25 years and need a refresher?
I'll try. I will try, but it took us 8 years to film, and it's 3 hours long. So I'll do my best.
Cut it to 2 hours. Yep.
Yeah. But basically, we followed the stories of William Gates and Arthur Agee and their families, two inner city kids who really had this dream that basketball was a way out. And I think for us as filmmakers, what we were looking at was we were impressed with the kids and their families and where they were coming from, but we worried also about, is basketball their way out? And we followed them through their entire high school years. We saw them go through rough times, really hard times, and also some really good times. And there was a lot of stuff, very quickly, just to say, that was, I think some of the wrong underpinnings that began to happen in basketball you see in the film. There were also some incredibly great things like Coach Bedford at Marshall High School, who was this incredible coach. So I think it's an interesting film to look at sports, society, and how much all of it means to us personally, and also what is it that we are still, I think, selling to our youth about the importance of sports.
So let's play a clip of it. Central characters again. Arthur Agee and William.
Arthur Agee and William Gates.
Yep.
When I was young, when I was little, that's all I used to think about, the NBA. If I set my mind, I can go. I can go. Get in good college, I can go. But if I don't, I ain't gonna be no drug dealer, cry about it, come back and, stick up gas stations and nothing like that. Probably going to comedian or architecture, something like that.
You don't think that you'll have the kind of tough times like that your dad's been through?
Nah. I can't say that I will, I can't say that I don't. I don't know.
You know, 4 years ago, that's all I used to dream about was playing in the NBA. I don't really dream about it like that anymore. You know, even though I love playing basketball, but, I want to do other things with my life too.
Hi, Daddy. Hi, baby. How you doing? How you doing? I love you. I love you. Tell Daddy thank you.
If I had to stop playing basketball right now, I think I'd still be happy. I think I would.
Thank you, Daddy. When Daddy gets you? Mommy.
That's why when somebody say, man, when you get to the NBA, don't forget about me and all that stuff, I should say to them, well, if I don't make it, but you don't forget about me.
Yeah, that's right. So, look, this is a film that did not have high production value, but I think the real benefit of it was the incredible emotional intelligence that you applied to the filming. These young men showed their vulnerability, and what you selected and what you put in that film really allowed us to get into their lives, and therefore allow us to reflect ourselves. It was just incredible.
These were really brave kids, brave families, that it takes a lot to open up your life. And part of the thing that we had to say to them as filmmakers was, look, right now things may be bad or not so great, or you're going through a rough time. But what we were hoping was 25 years down the road, people are still going to look at their story and people are going to learn from it. And so I think that's the thing that they really were amazing how much they trusted us in that regard.
Yeah, they're incredible. Chris, you were a young man at that time. In fact, you were in the film. You were in the film because you were the top, young basketball player in the country. Tell us about how old were you and how did that film impact you?
This film,
You would have been a senior in Nike camp senior year.
that's when you filmed it,
Right.
Yeah, and so about 17 years old. And for me, even though, and you were correct in saying the production value wasn't much, but I think to my culture, the production value was more than a Disney movie or anything else because I saw myself. And it was the first time I got to see myself or my family or structure because I don't think what people realize, even though I was the #1 kid then, I was dreaming with these guys. You're a kid, you don't know what #1 means or how far you're up the ladder, or at least then you didn't with no social media and those type of things. So guys like this, we were rooting for because you don't know guys' situations, and then to see, one of the guys' father sell drugs on the corner and him getting teased, or to see a guy get hurt. And when you see Arthur at the end say, I'm happy now, I'm okay, well, I think that's only because he had a child. That would be interesting to kind of understand that. And so for me and my generation, this was the beginning of kind of taking back your own narrative and making sure you expressed it and not letting people that don't know you or don't know your situation or never been around you tell people what your life is like. So Peter is my friend and business partner, but I try to thank him as much as I can for making this movie because it's easy to have these conversations if you're not where they are. And so you need to understand what's really going on in order to combat the different things that are happening within different communities. So to me, it's very important. People talk about the Fab Five or UNLV and things like that. this was the first time they saw us before we came out. So I thought it was pretty cool what you did.
So I want you to talk about your pathway as a basketball player. When you got started, when you were doing rec, did you do AAU, travel, high school, et cetera? And compare that to the pathway of kids today.
Wow. The first time I was noticed, I went to a school called Temple Christian in Eastern Michigan, looking for my father to see if he gives me a nod, but yeah, Eastern Michigan, is that right? Yeah, so, I'm sorry, in Inkster, and I was so blessed. Channel 7 came out and did an interview, and they showed me, it was the first time I'd ever seen a TV camera, and they came in your face and they say, wow, you're gonna be a great basketball player one day. So these are the first times you're hearing these things. And they say, what college do you want to go to? And being a Magic Johnson fan, Michigan State, right away, that's where I'm going, the green and white. And
Sorry, Michigan State fans, it didn't happen.
they got my brother, it's okay, I don't feel sorry for State. So that was somewhat of a real introduction into the world as far as how people respond, those type of things when you haven't even reached puberty yet. Then it started to, I was blessed to go to small Christian schools, so the level of family and community were really strong there. And so we had, I won't say good coaches, but we had good people that were the coaches. And most coaches really aren't good. I don't want to bust anyone's bubble. But it's about being a better person to show these kids the tenets of life, to show these kids how the best parts of sports is what make all of you successful. So being a great teammate, coming to work early, leaving late, finding out what you can't do well, making yourself better, having something bigger than yourself. You can't wallow in pity when you're on a team. You may have to sit on the bench or you may have to start a night. So when you go into a community that teaches you, hey, Chris, if you don't play well today, or my mother would say if you don't play well, or if my mother would say if you don't get a B or above, you can't play. Well, I'm getting a B for the team, not necessarily for myself or my mom, but I want to keep going. And so for me, the wonderful structure of how I was introduced to basketball was great. I never had pressure to play. I played every sport. Football is my favorite then, and I would play football in the street, baseball in the street, those type of things. On Saturday, my block Biltmore would go over to Gilchrist, and my father, if you had good grades, he'd take us over there, play artificial quarterback. And so sports to me was just always incredible because I heard about the positive, the wonderful things out of those. And so getting a little bit older and going through the process of playing AAU and those type of things.
What age did you start AAU?
I started AAU, I'm not sure, maybe 13, maybe 14, but the culture was different. So I really don't want to compare kids in my day to kids today because it's 100% different. Back when I played, if you were in 7th grade, and I had a friend of mine, he went to maybe Detroit Mercy or somewhere, Detroit Mercy, middle school, but he got in trouble because he played for a CYO team and AAU. So when I grew up, you could only play for one, and that was fun for us because I still wanted to play during the baseball season. I wanted to go cross country. I wanted to do track, so I didn't want basketball to go through every season. And I learned from some of the best athletes that the best athletes are 2-3 sport guys, that if you want to get great footwork, you got to do track. If you want to get your endurance, you have to do long distance. I even had guys that would train with the volleyball players. So when I grew up, it was different. And female volleyball players, female hoopers. And so I grew up in a culture where it was about the sport. And if you're good at one, you could probably be good at another. Mm-hmm. The recruiting went up a little bit, or ramped up a lot. And I was really blessed to have an AAU coach. His name was Curtis Hervey. When I say he wasn't a good coach, you don't know the NBA stuff or things that take a kid to another level. But what he did with me in my heart, what he did by having us focus, study together, those type of things kind of reinforced the principles of my parents and under the sports kind of genre title. And it made my life very fun in sports. I was committed to a team, and our AAU coach and our high school coach had a relationship. So my coach, Coach Keener, he knew that we were his during the year, and he knew that we were our AAU coaches during the summer. And if their two men that should communicate and want what's best for the kids, then they should have a plan to make us better each year and not be selfish trying to hold us hostage to each entity. And so I really thank the village that I grew up with, the people that were surrounding me, because it's not about the coaches, it's about the people who are coaches. And I had some really good men direct me coming up in high school.
I think that time period was also so different because AAU was really at its beginning in many ways. And so when we started to make Hoop Dreams, really Steve James and Frederick Marks, who I made the film with, they were really fascinated with doing a film just on one street court. Because street basketball was sort of where you made your name. I mean, in Chicago at least, that was sort of like the place. And kids played outside and you knew each other. It was the way that everybody met each other too. And it had sort of this whole rule system, you know, like if you lost, you sat. It was this whole way of mediating and sort of meeting people who were really different than you. And so we were fascinated in that, but we came in right at the time when that started to fade away. And basically high school coaches, I mean, I think one of the things that we saw was how important good high school coaches were to the kids because they were the conduit then. Now I think AAU coaches are much more the conduit.
The difference, Peter, between the coaches back then was that a high school coach had to be a teacher.
Right.
So a high school coach had to know how to communicate with students, how to interact. And today, because it is who you know, you can be a coach just by association, meaning I know a good kid, he's really good, I'm not gonna let any of you guys get around him, I'm gonna coach him, that's the way it's gonna be, and now you're considered a great coach when really it's the talent that you have, and that's how it's changed. I mean, here in Detroit as well, you know, every weekend, every Sunday after church, we would head straight to 1300 Beaubien because 1300 Beaubien was the police station and PAL was there. And so all the police officers I knew, they were our coaches, and so I got to watch guys that came before me, like Derek Coleman and Steve Smith and all these guys, and so it was more of a community culture, and we were happy to play AAU to get out of town and to see someone else or to meet another player or to see how you fared against another city. It was that small, but it was more of a cultural pride, which allowed every city to have their own identity, like New York. They'll hate me, but they can't shoot jumpers. They could just dribble. Detroit, we had toughness. California was this way. And so it was a much more community-driven sports entity then because we didn't have the internet. You didn't have, 10,000 followers. You'd have to read a little small book, Street and Smiths or something else to see who was ranked in those things. So I think growing up in my time was easier because the culture allowed for it to be different. I can't imagine the pressure, or I can't imagine being 12 years old and being told you can make it to the NBA and believing it because you don't have the skill, but because a coach told you that to keep you around. And so really scared for the kids today.
12, that's late. I mean, today we have second grade AAU national championships. I mean, I've seen that.
It's crazy.
Kids chucking the ball from their hips, learning bad habits. Parents are like, the umbilical cord is still connected. They're in the ref's face. I mean, it is something else.
Not to be a bring down, but I mean, I filmed 4.5 years of AAU ball, following teams, and it's a film I'll never release, and partly because so much of what I filmed was and I hate to use the word, but it was dirty, and I really felt like that if I put the film out, it would be the kids who get hurt. Not the adults. And they weren't just in good hands. And I get emotional talking about it because it's like one of those things where it was actually so dirty in my mind that no one noticed. They let me film everything. And no one noticed it was something that to me was very shady at best. Yeah. I'm not saying all of it, I'm just saying, but 60%. Mm-hmm. So, and my kid was playing AAU ball then. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, boy, I don't know, this is getting way far out there. And then all of a sudden, you're seeing AAU ball on television in the summer because they need content. Mm-hmm. I think that's another thing that, we're all part of this. Mm-hmm. I made Hoop Dreams, but I also have done tons of work for, all other companies, ESPN, Nike, you name it. Mm-hmm. We're all part of the problem too, in trying to make this work well for kids. Mm-hmm. So it's on us to help solve it.
Right. I mean, there are definitely some good things going on.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, USA Basketball and the NBA have worked together to create the first ever, guidelines around what's age appropriate and developmentally appropriate at different stages, specific, down to like no zone D before between the ages of 7 and 11, between 9 and 11 years old, keeping it to 1 to 2 games a week, 2 practices, promoting multi-sport play up through 14. So we do have some organization, we do have some concepts that have been put in place in the past few years. How do we make sure that these best practices get embedded at the community level, that coaches are getting the message, or maybe even being held accountable to best practices?
What I would ask is that parents get involved. This is not a secret club. These coaches are not as good as you think they are. And what I mean by that is go back to your high school days and go to a guy that may have been a jerk. He's still a jerk today coaching your kid. They're teaching your kid how to communicate, how to problem solve. And so now, just as you mentioned, the NBA, USA Basketball, let's just think about it. They put together these wonderful guidelines from the best basketball minds ever. So what I look at that as, it empowers the parent. My best coach could not tell you much about basketball. He would get any of your kids to the next level. Second grade math, graduate studies, whatever, because he knows how to inspire. And what I pick up is that there is a culture going on that starts with coaches and parents, and it goes down, one of expectation. One of, oh, you see Chris do that, you should do that. No, you don't put in those hours. There's forcing your kids to work extra hours and play 4 games a week when they're not practicing at all. And so I really would encourage you guys, look inside yourself. You can do it. The reason why it's the #1 sport that's played is obvious. You don't need 9 people with baseball, 18 people with baseball. You don't need this many people with soccer. You can go hoop by yourself. It's very simple why we're the #1 sport. And with that, you guys can all find 5 kids and to play ball with. And if you want help, keep looking on the website or talk to other athletes. But the lessons that were taught how to get better, they're being circumvented now through Instagram or through a fancy move, not through playing against kids older at your church for 1 year, or not through no one gets a trophy, everybody stunk today. None of that goes on, and I think as parents, as teachers, as community leaders, as people that care, you can always insert a lesson inside of your practice lesson. And I think those are the things that are missing. When I talk to my friends that are head of companies, they always look for an athlete to see if they can hire, because supposedly we're supposed to know how to work harder, how to come in late, how to give the extra mile. And when you learn those things at a younger age, it makes everything else easier. Trust me. Disappointment, getting back over it. Where else as a kid do you fall and have to get up? Where else as a kid do you have to work so hard to get better? Because if it's in school, okay, but we get those lessons later. But where is it that a kid really has to empower themselves and go through really adult life lessons, and sport is the answer. And so I would hope that with the guidelines of the league, with the new things, you ask, how can we make it better? By inserting ourselves in the process, because you know what's in that kid's head. And by the way, the #1 8-year-old kid is not going to the NBA. So let's quit putting that out there.
Yeah, and stop ranking.
It hasn't since LeBron, okay? And so when we talk about like the kids playing too many minutes, and those are for guys that think or that have already chosen their major in sports. How can you choose a major in sport before 14? How can you choose what you're going to be great at? Your body hasn't even developed. You haven't even grown, So I would just encourage community leaders, parents, do not be intimidated by sport. You know enough. You know how to discipline your child. You know what encourages you. You know what gives them incentive. You know what does that for his friends. It is the best distraction ever to have a group of people that are all focused on the same thing, and you can use that to kind of control how they look at life, how they view things, and how they can just continue to get better.
Here. No, that's...
But do we need to make it easier on parents? In other words, does structure drive culture? If you have second grade national championships, right? You create this scenario where parents feel like their kid's going to be left behind unless they get slotted early and loaded up with the private trainers and all the other stuff. I'm going to give away I talked earlier about the piece tomorrow morning. I'm going to give it away. In Norway, they have a concept. 93% of kids play in that country. Great health outcomes and otherwise. No national championships before the age of 13. No regional championships before the age of 11. And the reason they do that is to keep the parents from going crazy and trying to aggregate all the best kids and ramp them up and get these big dreams in their head. So should we be a little bit more judicious about when we offer up, we're trying to figure out the elite championships and who are the best kids are at the early ages?
Well, I think one thing we need to do, this was something that I found all of my years filming sports with kids, is you got to take one word out, career. They should have fun. At 9, 10, 11 years old, they're talking about kids who are having careers. There's a scene in Hoop Dreams where William, he's a senior and he's talking to his coach as he's leaving. And the coach says to him, "You had an okay career. You're pretty good. You're going to a D1 school." It's the only time I almost lost it with him as a coach. Because for me, it was like, look at the person. Here's this kid who, passed his ACTs, is going to a D1 school, had a child when he was 15 years old, took care of that kid. He's married to Catherine now. They have 4 children. He's a fantastic human being, and all that mattered to that guy at that moment was his career. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we have to try to pull back from. Mm-hmm. And I know because I've messed up in it. My daughter was a D1 athlete, and I fell in love with it. Who wouldn't? It's hard. Mm-hmm. And I think I pressed too much and stuff like that. And junior year, she burnt out in college. Mm-hmm. And so I have, it's hard for parents. Mm-hmm. But I think the big thing that I want to say is we all have to do what you guys have been doing here today, mm-hmm. which is we have to tell our stories. I'm a big believer in the power of stories. It's what I do for a living. And so everybody should be asking their parents, they should be asking Chris, they should be asking kids, young kids, mm-hmm. what's going on? Talk about those stories of sports so that we actually can archive them and actually start to learn from them, because that's the key. It makes us human, is to be able to connect like that.
One thing, and I'll cut off, but Peter and I have been working on a documentary for 8 years. And I've just finished a book for over 8 years, and very proud about that. And what Peter was talking about is telling your story is so important, because my experience from being the kid all of you guys are talking about, and my friends were their friends. So I look at this a little personally. You know what I mean? It's not like, how are we gonna? I understand Norway, but we'll kill them in sports. So I don't think about that way. I'm telling you from an athlete, right? How we have to think. So Norway isn't the best example for me, but I would, I'm just saying this, don't say this to a kid. You gotta know, you gotta know what to do. But the main question, I think the scariest question that was asked, that he said, is the parents. So I just asked parents to get involved, right? And to be part of it, like we used to. Coaches, pastors, police officers, they were the coaches. They were in your community. It had a difference. And now we're worried about everybody else. If the NBA has made this wonderful umbrella to say, here are the rules with USA Basketball. If you have the rules, if you have the recipe, if I have a recipe to cook and the utensils, I can make anything, as long as it's clear. And you guys need to get involved. It's not going to stop. Corporations are still going to be in there. We talk about it. Second grade AAU basketball game, right? What's the difference between that and 14-year-old World Series? Because they were playing when they were in second grade. It's not a cutoff point. It's not a litmus test. It's not this. It's those that are concerned get involved. Do not wait. Do not sit around. You can get involved. You can find 5 kids and coach them. Today's with the new coaching techniques, find a coach for 200 hours or $200 an hour. And there's no resume, just that he played basketball at Oak Park for 4 years and he's going to be a coach. You didn't talk to his coach to see what type of person he was. You don't know his school records. You don't know. You have to get involved. The ones that I played with that had overbearing mothers and fathers, we laughed at them. So really you need to stop them because they're going to get bullied. It's not cool to have your mom screaming at the game. That's not cool anymore. It's still embarrassing. You guys have heard of like Lamar Ball and those guys, like how that goes on every single level. And so I just really implore you guys. I know the culture. I know these athletes. I was one of them. I work with them. I help these families today personally. You have to get involved. And you know the answers, especially with what the NBA and other leagues have done. You can be some of the best coaches out there because you care for the kids first. That means if a kid can't shoot, you'll really want him to get better and not say, oh, we'll just keep him, but we have our starter over here. And you'll really help the kids get better. You'll really give them exercises and ways to get better and books to read and things they never thought of that will just open their life to a whole new world beyond sports. But sports is the conduit. And I just really want to implore you guys. The answer is you get involved. You'll help a lot of kids.
Well, that would be that'd be a fine way to end this panel. That's the call to action. It's now in your lap to go home and fix this. He put it on you. Really want to thank our panel. Sure. Peter, Chris, terrific comments. Appreciate it. Bring Cassidy back up. Okay.
Thanks again, guys. And Chris actually just reminded me of someone, a coach I had growing up named Mr. Robinson. He was a community leader. And, you know, he probably had one of the biggest impacts on my life. And he didn't have a connection to any of the other girls, but he galvanized us. And he made sure that we played pickup and we learned lessons that we can always learn, in school under structured environments. It's about, socially learning from each other. So thank you for reminding me of him. So that was an engaging conversation with three very impressive people, and we want to continue to have these conversations throughout the afternoon. And look, children deserve environments that limit injuries and offer protections against emotional, physical, and other forms of abuse. And today, many parents demand as much. Project Play's commitment to prevention extends to asking the tough questions, including having to reform USA Gymnastics in the wake of course, the sexual, physical, and emotional abuse of girls chasing the American dream. I'd like to invite our next panel to the stage to explore the question, moderated by Emily Stetz of the Aspen Institute Sports and Society Program.
Hi. Thank you. I want to thank both you, Wendy, and Miss Val for being with us here today. For me, as a former multi-sport athlete and high school gymnast, it's truly an honor to share the stage with you, Wendy, the founder of Wendy Hilliard Gymnastics Foundation and a former Hall of Famer, and with you, Miss Val, after your incredible tenure with the UCLA gymnastics team. And for those of you who don't watch college gymnastics on YouTube, a barn burner of a Pac-12 championship last year in 2018. Congratulations. Now, the topic we're calling on both of you to discuss today is anything but light, and it concerns questions around how to truly reform USA Gymnastics in the wake of the Larry Nassar sexual abuse scandal. But both of you have found unique and innovative ways to reemphasize joy in a sport that has been under a dark cloud. So, Ms. Val, I'd like to start with you. The Nassar scandal seems to reveal cracks in the USA Gymnastics system, namely that programs are organized around identifying and producing Olympic champions, often at the cost of the health and safety of the athletes. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how has the USA Gymnastics system impacted the health of the athletes you've coached?
I would say the previous USA Gymnastics system, because hopefully we are changing, and I think that, Wendy, we're seeing good change within the system. But I have had quite a few of the victims were our alumni at UCLA, and there's 2 of them that are currently still on the team. And so it hit very close to home. And I just remember being in DC and speaking with Senator Feinstein and some people from House of Representatives, and they said, how do we change the culture of gymnastics? And I said, it's not just gymnastics. It's prevalent in every area in life, but we're talking about sport right now. And it was just so clear to me at that moment, it was so simple, that when we put medals and winning over human beings is when we open up our culture of our organization to a disease that spreads like a cancer, and that's how you get over 400 young women sexually abused by their team physician. And it was just so obvious to me in that moment that we have a massive responsibility in this country to reestablish the definition of success and winning for our children. And it starts with us coaches, and it starts with parents, it starts with anybody that oversees the development of a young child. And that's on us. You know, when we talk about, there's more reports of depression, stress, anxiety, and sadly suicide within our youth, that's on us. It's not on them. It's on us to change this culture. And as Tom keeps talking about, by changing the structure.
Absolutely. And Wendy, you have formerly served as the chair of the Athletes Council for USA Gymnastics, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the importance of athlete voice, not only in the elite pipeline, but also in the importance of youth voice in some of the youth programming that you run.
Well, it's very important. So I really consider myself, besides being an elite athlete, an advocate. And that came because in rhythmic gymnastics, they have a group routine. And 1 year before the World Championships, they were choosing the team. I'd already been World Championships. And the coach said, Wendy, we can't choose you because you stand out too much. I was like, are you telling me in 1983 I can't do this because I'm black? And my parents, from Detroit, by the way, they had me write USA Gymnastics, and they had to change it. So when I saw that possibility that I could speak out and really make change, it made me an advocate. So I was able to lead the Athletes Council, and at the time we had about 7 people on the committee, and it was very helpful. So I had that, and then I was also president of the Women's Sports Foundation. So my mentors are like Billie Jean King and Donna DeVerona and Willie White. So I had some pretty formidable women to work from. And so having the voice, it taught me that you have to give access to sport, that you have to speak up. I was a captain of the team, but it came because I think people have to become advocates for themselves. Parents have to become advocates for their children, but in that sense, not just for your child. If you're an advocate, you have to do it for the whole. And that's kind of what we're doing here. You can't do it for one person or kind of like this. Sometimes you have to make really hard choices. But what's important now is that in gymnastics, the athlete voice is valued. It's one thing to give someone a microphone, but if you don't value what they say, and you have to, especially for girls' artistic gymnastics, give them a longer time. Usually when you're on an athletes council, you have about 10 years before you can do that one. Well, if you retire when you're 16, it's just too early. You have to give them a lot more time. So even though the athlete voice is there, right now there are only 3 athletes on the committee, which is not enough in I would say, but it is important, and you have to start young. You have to maybe have a captain of the team, be able to have a voice when you're younger. It's things like that. To grow like you want to grow sports, to be fearless in your voice and to speak out takes practice as well. And so you have to start developing that in your young people.
Absolutely. And Ms. Val, when you were talking about redefining success, you both, of course, have a very strong view of what that kind of leadership looks like. Talk to me about how you tried to create an environment that would foster that kind of redefining of success and really bringing that joy back into gymnastics.
Well, I come from the dance world, so I was a ballet dancer. I've never done gymnastics. I've never gone upside down. I attempted a cartwheel 2 years ago, and I didn't get over. Pathetic. But so when I was asked to be the head coach of UCLA Gymnastics, I had no idea what I was doing. I did not grow up with this win. We had a win. I didn't grow up learning how to develop a team culture. And so I definitely had to figure it out. And a catchphrase these days is to figure out your why. And so I've had to figure out what my why was, because in my humble opinion here of athletics, there were 2 philosophies, simple philosophies. One was, as a coach, as a parent, as an athlete, one philosophy is it's all about winning. And winning is about bragging rights. It's about being able to say, ha-ha, we beat you. And it's about money. And none of those resonated with me. So if I was going to do my job as the head coach of UCLA Gymnastics, I had to figure out my why. And that became extremely clear to me, that through athletics, there's no better venue to learn really tough life lessons that you don't learn in the classroom outside of sports. That's where we learn those lessons. That's where we teach those lessons to our athletes. And at that moment, my why became, I got to develop champions in life through sport. And if I did my job well enough, developing the whole person into a champion, it would translate to the competition floor. So I don't remember the question, but that became my why. But one thing that Wendy said, and she said you have to be an advocate for yourself, and you have to be an advocate. I was walking through the airport yesterday, and there was this very statuesque young man, black man, who was well over 6 feet tall, and his T-shirt said, "I am more than an athlete." And I just ran up to him and gave him this big hug, like crazy lady, in the airport, and then tried to explain myself, which was even worse. It made the whole situation worse. But I was like, yes, that advocacy for yourself. And then one more thing I want to say, and how I really did help develop the person who is the athlete. The number one thing that I feel we all need to learn in life is how to listen better. And to really, as Wendy said, to give our youth, no matter how small they are, and maybe their words don't really say what they mean, but to really listen to them. And then to be able to say, is this what you're saying? And I learned something through our sports psychologist, who now he oversees all the health and wellness for the NBA, that when you switch those letters, listen, you rearrange them, it spells silent. And in order to truly listen, we have to silence our brains and stop trying to be right and stop trying to figure out how we're going to respond and really just shut up and listen to our children.
Absolutely. And as we come back to this topic of joy and listening to our gymnasts, and as you've both talked about in the past, really developing the whole athlete, I can think of no better example than Caitlin Ohashi, has really broken through and showed everyone the true joy that we know about gymnastics. And so for those of you who haven't seen it yet, we are going to play a clip of her routine that went viral recently.
She won an ESPY for having more views. Think about this. A gymnast, not an Olympian, a college gymnast, had more views worldwide than any other sport clip in 2019. Why? Because of the joy that we all just saw. And that's what everybody around the world has gotten back to me about. It was like her joy. Everybody says the same word, that joy.
Absolutely, and I've heard both of you talking in so much of your coaching and in your programming, Wendy, how you're trying to either reemphasize more of that or create environments where that can really shine through. And so I'd like to talk to you, both of you, about what you've, I think, called, Wendy, turning the triangle, or you call her talking about the elite gymnast being at the top of this triangle, turning that on its side so that you can open up gymnastics to a broader group of people. And then Val, come to you and talk more about how you work with girls who come through and do that. So I'm curious how, Wendy, in your programming, you're balancing that high quality programming with low cost, and also, as you say, turning that triangle, working with everyone.
Well, it's really critical. I mean, when you see something like that, kids want to do gymnastics. Especially in the last 5 or 6 years, the top athlete has been African-American gymnast. So I had my program around for like 20 years, and then after Gabby won and Simone Biles, there's just a want to do it because of the joy. And you shouldn't not be able to do it because of the cost. And so my story is, I grew up here in Detroit. I learned gymnastics in the recreation department, thank you very much. They hired these 4 coaches from Ukraine, and all of a sudden we had the best, one of the best teams in the country, right? I made the national team. I was the first Black to compete for the U.S. in rhythmic. But what I found is that you could have really great training that didn't cost a lot. And the parents kept raising money for travel. So what we do in New York, we've served over 17,000 kids with free and low-cost gymnastics, and expanded here to Detroit 3 years ago. So I spent a lot of time raising money, but it's so worth it. So the kids that come through the program either get exposed to gymnastics and high-quality gymnastics in 3 disciplines, because the key is what you're talking about. Like, when we focus our coaches, I'm like, don't even look at the scores. It's how you do the routine. You know, there's a really thing that we've both talked about, and we call her Miss Val because we all respect her, is the artistic part of gymnastics, and that's what makes it so joyful. So if you can do that one, that means you can express yourself. And so what I want to do with the programs, and USA Gymnastics has to support gymnastics on a large basis, the grassroots. Gymnastics is a very specific sport. When you get on the high level, it's not like everybody can do it. Like, you can be an elite swimmer and then retire and go swim in the pool. You can't be like an elite gymnast and go out and try and do a double back 2 years later. It just doesn't work that way. So it's a really fine thing that you have to support the grassroots so that you can have it available to people. And then the elites, they are where they are, but you have to, cover your base.
Absolutely. And Ms. Val, in terms of, can you speak a little bit about how working through the USA Gymnastics system, how that works in terms of finding the next generation of Olympians, and the pressures on young gymnasts as they advance through that system, and then in a lot of cases come to some of your college programs, and the impact of that system that you see on them?
You know, and I wish I could speak more in depth about this, because I'm not really involved at the USAG level, because college and USAG are so very different. But I do feel that what is changing now, and what is part of the problem has been all these years, there was one avenue to get to the national team and the world team and the Olympic team, and that was through the Caroli Ranch in Houston. One. And when I was talking to my softball friend, coach, legend, Sue Enquist, she said, this is crazy. There's like 32 veins of softball in this country. In gymnastics, there's one. And that is hopefully changing as well. But, we're a sport based on perfection, which is bad, because you're dealing with these, even if they're not type A personalities, they become these uber type A personalities, because God forbid they make a mistake. And I have very strong feelings about the word failure. I think it needs to be taken out of our vocabulary. It doesn't exist in my mind, because as I tell our student athletes, if they go up on balance beam and they fall and they come off and they go, failed. And it's like, time out. Anytime in life you set a goal and you debrief about what you learned, what worked, what didn't work, and you learn something, how can that be failure? It cannot be. So this whole fear of failure thing, I don't use the word in our gym. I don't like it. And when I do have an athlete that gets so upset with themselves and they make a mistake, I was telling Tom, I throw the proverbial cold water in their face, and I just go, get over yourself. It's called athletics. Fall down 11 times, get up 12, right? That's what we do. You think you're perfect, you're not. Get over yourself. Let's go figure this out.
Absolutely. Wendy, it looks like you're in agreement.
Well, it's true. I mean, the thing is that we love, in the end, an Olympic athlete is something you strive for. It's what I strive for. I didn't make it, but the thing is that day in and day out, the practice is different. It can't be that intense all the time. Yeah, it takes you a long time to do that one. And how you speak to gymnasts, how you motivate them is very, very important, because they are hard enough on themselves. If they've chose gymnastics, then they're willing to do the same element over and over and over again until they get it straight. So it's a certain mindset. But we can change it, and USA Gymnastics definitely can, because my thing is that I think they have to be more accountable to the grassroots, right? Everything that's going on in these clubs, you have to know what's going on there, because that's where it all starts. And then you move up the level. But if you're not paying attention to where it starts, you can't like co-opt them later and then take them over to one place, right? The people that have spent the first 6 or 7 years developing these athletes need to be attended to all the time and not thrown to the side, because that's where your base is. That's where the joy of gymnastics
Right.
is.
And we need to redefine success. And if you win, are you successful? Case in point, USA Gymnastics. How many medals have we won? Were we successful? Anybody that calls that success with that many young women being sexually abused, they need some help. So we need to redefine winning. We need to redefine success. Can you feel success without winning? We need to redefine all of that for our children. And they need to be like Tom Schreiber was saying this morning about the Special Olympian that crosses the line, and she may be 5th, and she throws her arms up. And she's like, pride in a job well done. Yes, she absolutely deserves to feel successful. That key component is being missed. And I think, when I do the flow chart in my mind, sadly, it comes down to medals and money. And so going back to the grassroots, if we would reward clubs for the amount of kids that they have in their clubs and keep in their clubs versus where they finish on the podium, that would start to change the structure.
Absolutely. And a lot of what I'm hearing from both of you and what I have heard in our previous conversations has been about, not only as you talked about, Val, redefining success, but also from you, Wendy, being able to really kick the doors down and say, we want more folks to have access to gymnastics, which is an expensive sport. You need warm-up Leos and grips and ankle braces for those of us that sprain ankles. Among things like that, it does get very expensive. And we do have a great example in the form of one of the videos from your foundation, Wendy, that I'd love to have us watch, and then talk a little bit more about how you decrease those barriers.
The kids are really happy here. The coaches like to be here. The parents are really grateful to have something for their kids. It's a really quality program. And you know what it is? It's about pushing them to be excellent. Gymnastics. You have to go out there by yourself. All these judges judging you, right? And you just have to have the confidence. That's what my kids have when they leave here. They have confidence.
When I do a skill, I feel like I can't do it, but they push me to like do my skill, and I'm really grateful for that.
What gymnastics has taught me is to not be afraid of anything and just to go to do anything that you want in life. So we're gonna do the team cheer that we do every time after practice. 1, 2, 3.
We're all doing that when we leave, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, get your groove on, get your groove on.
That's not joy, I don't know what is. Yes, Val could dance to that.
We could do that.
That's true. Well, that's part of the thing is that when you're in the gym, you want the kids to work hard, but you also want them to have a good time. You want them to be together. It's very important that we all perform together, all the disciplines. But it's that joy that, you want kids to have access to, which is a big thing. And the cost shouldn't be in the way, because it's more important for us as a society to have everyone be able to experience whatever their joy is. And for a lot of people, it's gymnastics, or it can be figure skating, or whatever it is, but you don't want that to be a barrier to them. You wouldn't do that in education, and you shouldn't do that in sports either.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in terms of how we might create this system and this future of youth gymnastics that you both are talking about, Does the mission of USA Gymnastics need to change to open up more and focus more on the grassroots? Wendy, I've heard you talk a lot about this, and as we've discussed before, is that the mission of what they should be trying to do?
Well, the mission is a little wonky. It's too light, actually. They say to pursue those that want to enjoy gymnastics, la, la, la. I'm like, okay, y'all can be a little tighter on that because it's not telling you what you need to do. So they need to rewrite that. But mainly what they need to do is be accountable. Let's be clear on all levels of what you do in gymnastics. So I'm, former gymnast, we didn't flip anymore, but I take yoga. So my yoga teacher a couple days ago, she says, in order to have change, you have to have chaos, right? It's a famous quote, and it caught me. I was doing my downward dog. I was like, use that. But the thing is that we've had this chaos in USA Gymnastics, and it's forced everybody to rethink of what you do. And I think what we're both saying is that you just can't pay attention to those 5 and 4 gymnasts, unfortunately, for the upcoming Olympics. You can't just pay attention to them. You have to pay attention to the whole sport. You have to make sure that it's healthy from all levels, and you've got to make sure that what they're doing, all those old gym clubs, you know what they're doing, and you're making sure that they're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. And creating champions for life, which I love that phrase that you use, Val, because a lot of what we're talking about, especially in Project Play as well, this focus around social emotional learning and saying, once again, I retired from gymnastics when I was 18, not because I wanted to, but my body was done. And you can't continue, and so, right, how do you take those skills?
But everything that you learned, okay, not having reached that elite level or all that and retiring at 18 because your body said you're done, you're still learning. If you had a good coach and you had a good environment, you still learned the exact same life lessons that a Simone Biles has learned. You still are a champion going out in life and making a positive difference, leaving a positive footprint as Simone Biles. Just because she's got more medals than you do doesn't mean that she is a bigger champion in life than you are. And that, as parents and as coaches, is the number one question we have to ask, is why do we have our children in sport? Why am I coaching? Is it all about winning? Because if it is, then it's all about my ego, and let's just be clear about it. Parents, like we're dealing with this whole admissions crisis now in college, is it about the fact your daughter or son want to go to that school, or is it about your ego, that you want to tell your friends that your child got into that school? Mm-hmm. All right, I just went all Miss Val on you.
Mm-hmm. And you've talked in the past, Wendy, about how you set the table for parents within your program and how you think that parents should be intersecting with the gymnastics process. And I'm curious about both of your thoughts and interests, and how could USAG set the table better for parents to have them intersect?
Well, that's really good. So in my program, the parents are actually not in the gym for our team practices. Because they're not paying my bills, so if you don't like what I'm doing, bye-bye. Anyway, yeah. But what we're doing is they come in and they see the kids when they compete, but why we do that one is because the kids need to focus, and sometimes the parents can be overwhelming and it pulls focus, right? The kids are looking at them instead of listening to the coaches. So there's definitely a place for parents, no doubt, but it's careful when you're too far in there. And for USA Gymnastics, they're kind of in a conundrum now because they pay for so much of their events. I mean, it's really costly. If you go to nationals and you're flying, you're paying the hotel for the family, and then you're paying an entry fee to get in. I mean, it's totally adding up. So they have to put it in the right place, that parents should look at gymnastics also as a fundamental sport. Most of the kids, if they stop doing gymnastics, they go on to do really good things in other athletic events. You were a really great track athlete and a distance athlete, scared of that. Yeah. But the thing is, what you learn in gymnastics is how to control your body and the flexibility and the strength. Many of athletes use that to become great pole vaulters and other events. So you have to look at gymnastics not necessarily in that long line, but as what Ms. Val is saying is, whenever you're doing your sport, you have to take that to the next area of your life. Whatever the sport is, if you're a great swimmer or you're doing judo, whatever you're doing, you have to make the whole experience be rewarding, because it is what we're teaching our kids. It is the most important thing that they do. I have my best friends who are all of my gymnastics friends, and these kids are learning the determination and the strength to be successful in their lives. Mm-hmm. And wherever level they take that, it needs to be positive, wherever they are.
You know, I get misunderstood a lot by the haters. Don't you just love the haters? because they think that I'm all Pollyanna, yippee skippy, and that's how I coach. We're talking about joy. We're not talking about fun. You know, fun is like recess. Joy is the stuff that we've all experienced, working towards something that's really, really hard, and being perseverant and resilient, and figuring out and having courage to take steps forward, not knowing with any guarantee of a result. That is what fuels us with joy. And I just am such a firm believer in whatever we're doing in life, that we are overseeing the development of a child, whether it's their schoolwork, athletics, studying for the SAT, whatever it is, we don't ever strip the joy out of the process of learning anything. Because when you infuse joy into the process, the result is that much richer. You don't have to strip the joy to become the best that you're capable of becoming.
I think I was going to ask one of you one last question. I think, Ms. Val, you might have answered that from your perspective, but I'll give that to you, Wendy, and then Ms. Val, if you have anything to add. But before we close, what I'd love to hear is, one, your parting thought for if USA Gymnastics could do one thing to truly reform on a systems level to better protect and support its gymnasts, what would that one thing be?
If it's only one thing, I say you have to be accountable. On all levels, in everything that you do, you have to take the responsibility. And on the other thing, you have to be transparent about it. So those are the two things that you have to do to bring us back to where we need to be in the sport.
And I think that any time that you're overseeing the development of a child, you need to be proficient in what you're teaching, and education. There are too many. Any one of you can go out and open up a gymnastics gym. It's like no problem. But we need to educate coaches and parents over how the human mind and body develops, and the emotions, and how the emotions and the mental state of a 9-year-old is different than a 12-year-old, than a 15-year-old. I just feel like we can never have enough education. And that's really, change happens through educating. It doesn't happen by being compliant. It happens through educating.
It's a great point to end on.
Mic drop.
Mic, absolutely. That's all the time we have today. Thank you both so much.
Okay, here we go. Woo!
Oh, boy.
And groove, and groove, and groove. Hey, 5, 6, 7, go! And groove, and groove, and groove, and groove.
As my kid would say.
I like their.
I think we all needed that burst of energy there. You know, and Valerie brought up a really interesting point.